Did I even read anything this month? Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today's video is the July reading wrap-up of 2023. Now, I only read 6 books this month, 2 of which were quite short. So one was a YA, and one was a novella, and then I read 4 other books. I was away for work for the last week. I also went away with my wife for our 2nd year wedding anniversary, and time just got away from me and I just didn't read a whole lot. With that work trip, as it tends to happen, I go away for about a week and there's either training on or I'm actually working with my team all day, and there tends to be events on every night, which doesn't really allow for a whole lot of reading time because I am definitely an early riser, early to bed. So if I'm out late at night, I'm just crashing when I get into bed at night. So I apologize, this may not be as entertaining or as long as these wrap-ups would normally be, but we'll jump into what I read. The first thing I read this month was a book called Red Hail. This is by Jamie Killen, and I believe it is a standalone, and it is a sci-fi. I would call it probably a first contact at the end of the day. So what happened in this book is we're following 2 timelines and what used to be the Galena plagues. So we have a timeline that is set about 60 years in the past and then present day. What happened in Galena 60 years ago was it started with the Red Hail. The skies turned dark and blood-like substance rained across the streets. Flash forward to present day, where people are starting to experience some of those plague symptoms again and trying to put those puzzle pieces together. This was a really cool way to experience the story of the 2 timelines, so we're basically seeing the symptoms of the plagues as they happened in the past versus what is now new or what is now the same, experiencing them 60 years on and trying to figure out clues from the past to see if they could stop it from happening in the future. So this was actually a lot of fun. I did not expect to enjoy this book as much as I did. It showed me that I really do enjoy this type of sci-fi. So I don't mind the odd space opera, but it does bog me down a little bit and I have to really stop and think about it. Whereas this type of sci-fi where it's a first contact or it's someone like a Blake Crouch or a Michael Crichton, they're just easy to jump into and read and enjoy as entertainment, whereas space operas tend to take me a little bit longer, even though I've come to enjoy them quite a bit. Red Hail was very easy to read. I'm looking forward to what this author does next, so it's got me excited to read some of their other works. I haven't found any other full novels from them. I think this was fairly recent, and this was a review copy that was sent to Epic Indie, so very thankful that I got a review copy for that one. Next one I read was called A Mean Piece of Water. This is by Jess McCutcheon. Now, you've probably seen Jess before if you've watched any of the Queer Corner episodes. She is one of the hosts of that particular series and is wonderful to talk to. So I thought that I would read A Mean Piece of Water because Jess writes queer characters, queer stories that are accessible for YA audiences, and I wanted to try and do it before the next episode came out, but I was only sort of halfway through. This story was absolutely delightful and has one of my favourite non-binary characters I've ever read, Kai, who must be protected at all costs. This was sort of, I guess, a young adult mystery thriller. There were mermaids, there was some sinister stuff happening with mermaids, but it was all very much about the characters and the character dynamics. I thought it was very sweet and very accessible for YA audiences and quite well written, very, very entertaining. So I'm planning on reading the second one before the next episode of the Queer Corner, or the other book that Jess has out. I then had a string of books that I was picking up and not connecting with. So I started The Doctrines of Fire by C.L. Jarvis. I just couldn't get into it, and it just, to me, was like, okay, my brain needs simple, and this book is not simple. So I started something else, I can't remember what it was, and it just didn't click either. So I decided to go with a novella and just let my mood reading rear its head, even though it doesn't come out very often, and I picked up The Nameless Restaurant by Tao Wong. This is a cozy fantasy novella, or a cozy cooking fantasy novella, and it was just delightful. We are in Mo Meng's kitchen. He runs a restaurant which doesn't have any signage. You only get to eat what he decides to cook for the day, but the food is incredible. This book was set in a way that it was all very character focused, and it felt like you were sitting at a restaurant table listening to conversations of people around you as you ate that you couldn't really avoid listening to. And it had little snippets from Tao Wong's other worlds. I know that he's written quite a few lit RPG, maybe there's a progression fantasy in there, and it had little Easter eggs for some of those other series, but it was definitely something you could consume in a single serving. See what I did there? This had so much love for food, so much love for cooking, and it was just delightful. So basically, we would see Mo Meng create a dish that would be going out to someone in the restaurant, and you would feel the love, you would feel the technique that was going into this meal, and then you would also get to experience what the person who was consuming that meal went through as they consumed it, with other just little bits and pieces happening around you. I thought it was brilliant, and I would highly recommend it as a palate cleanser, much like a sorbet. The next thing I read was Bastion by Phil Tucker. Mark Timoney has been bugging me to read this book for literal years, ever since we have known each other and started talking on a regular basis. This is a chunky progression fantasy, and I have to say, it was brilliant. This one we are following Scorio, and basically we are with a group of people, and the idea eventually is they will go into the war for hell. But to do that, they need training. So we start off with what's called a gauntlet run, where they basically see where your skill is at. And everyone is reincarnated again and again and again, so they're basically just cycling through these warriors for the war in hell. We follow Scorio, who has been basically shafted as what's called a red lister, and he's not allowed to continue on with his training, and he has to escape to basically do that himself. And we follow his progression throughout the story. This was quite slow paced, I would say, but the world building was so good, and you know me, I'm a world building guy. It happened all through Scorio's progression, and we do have a lot of other characters that come in. Scorio actually annoyed me throughout the entire thing, even though he was the main character. My favorite character in this book would probably be Naomi, or the Nightmare Lady as she's known in the beginning of the book, and eventually you get to know Naomi's name. I thought her growth was incredible, but you follow essentially 4 people throughout this book as they go through what Scorio goes through, and then there's an academy, so a schooling aspect, and then there's like competitions that happen at the end, and it was awesome. I can't wait to read book 2, Rascal Plains, or listen to book 2, because the narration of this was just... After that, I read Neon Ghosts by Daniel B. Green. Now, to be completely honest, I was very much convinced I was not reading a Daniel Green novel again after my experience with Breach of Peace. But I like cyberpunk, and the cover for this book is friggin' incredible. So I saw the Kickstarter, and I thought, you know what, I didn't appreciate the marketing around Breach of Peace. I won't go into it, but everyone sort of deserves a second chance. So I thought I would pick up the ebook and see if I wanted to eventually back that Kickstarter. Neon Ghost was awesome. I don't know what to tell you. If you like cyberpunk, this book was, even though it took some of the tropey parts of cyberpunk and, say, a tropey part of urban fantasy, it genre blended these so well to give a really fresh take on vampires. So if you like cyberpunk and you like sort of urban fantasy vibe with vampires, this book is awesome. It also deals with Taya, who is sort of addicted to vaping and the thrill as she tries to become an enforcer, and she gets caught up in this sort of murder mystery. I remember very early on when Green was advertising what he was trying to do with Breach of Peace was talk about people in authority and the law and using their powers for either good or bad, and where those lines blur. And that is done really well in Neon Gods, in my opinion. So if you were on the fence about it, I would highly recommend giving it a go and giving this author another shot. The last thing that I read, and the only physical book I have, is The King of Assassins. This is by R.J. Barker, and the conclusion to the Wounded Kingdom trilogy. Now, I did not know what to expect going into this one, and I read this one with, of course, the lovely Esme. We've been reading the entire series together. And she got to it before me, and she said, I don't know what's happened, but I'm 20% in, and I'm absolutely loving it. So I was like, that bodes well, because I didn't love the second book. I liked it, I thought it was fine, but I didn't love it. It definitely had middle book syndrome for me personally. This book is incredible. This book took the concepts from book 1 and book 2 and just upped those stakes. We're still following Girton Clubfoot, we're still following Ruffra, who we were introduced to in book 1. I won't go into too much detail for spoilers, but we also get some incredible insights into the backstory of one of the characters that have been consistent throughout this tale, Merila Khan, who is the master to Girton as he was going through his, I guess, assassin's apprenticeship or whatnot. I love this book. I did not put down the last 200 pages. I was flying, I was traveling throughout the last 200 pages of this book. I woke up in the morning, I read some before I went to breakfast, I read it through breakfast, I put the audiobook in when I had the 45-minute drive to the airport, and then I listened to it on the plane and finished it off on the plane. So, just incredible. R.J. Barker is an author for me. I will gush about R.J. Barker until the end of time. I'm now only have Tears of the Weirdwood. Tears of the Weirdwood? I'm thinking of Tears of the Kingdom, the Zelda game. Gods of the Weirdwood. This one is the last one that I have of R.J. Barker, and then I'm up to date. I have such FOMO for this readathon going on in August that I may just throw my TBR out the window and read Tired Child again. Maybe. I don't know. I'm a planned reader at the heart of it, so we'll see what happens there. But those are the books that I read in the month of July. What was your favourite pick of the month? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like the content, give one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will. I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.